Hello everybody, we are back again talking about three Atlantic teams that faded towards the back end of the season and whether or not it means this is all doom and gloom for them. Now before we start, I wanted to say please make sure to subscribe to my channel if you're new to me, new to hockey, whatever the case may be. I'd love to have you here and subscribed for the journey along the way as I try to do this as a career. Now having said that, let's talk about these three teams and exactly whether or not they should be feeling gloomy this offseason. So, coming into the season, two of these three Atlantic teams had some expectations. Of course, we're talking about the Buffalo Sabres, Detroit Red Wings, and Ottawa Senators. Out of those three teams, I really feel like Detroit and Ottawa had the most expectations. Ottawa by far had the biggest expectations, in my opinion, as they had a busy offseason by acquiring Alex Brinkett and Claude Giroux, a guy that they had tried to get before, finally got him this offseason with a 3-year deal. And then, of course, to Brinkett, a guy that Chicago flipped out, and looking pretty good there for Ottawa. Then, of course, Detroit had a fairly busy free agency period too and looked to make a playoff push for the first time since the 2015-16 season and has a fan base that for the past 30 or so years really has come to expect playoffs except for the past 5 years, which is weird because growing up, Detroit was that team you really didn't want to play. Now they're that team, especially during the rebuilding years. You're like, okay, we get to play them. So yeah, there was just a weird period. Anyway, for Buffalo, out of the bunch, I'd say that they had the least expectations coming into the year. I feel like they had a lot of young players you were excited about, but not a spot where you expected them to be in the playoff push. Regardless, though, all these teams were in a playoff hunt by the end of the year, and that was before all three teams hit a slump kind of around the same time, and then that really closed out the year. Now, Buffalo, at the time of recording this, Monday, the March 27th, was or is kind of in a spot to make the playoffs, but I don't really see it happening. They're like 3-5-2 in their past 10 games. I'm not expecting them to make the playoffs. That's okay, though. But talking about these teams, is it all bad news for them? Well, let's talk about each team and see what I have to say. For Detroit, I would say the Detroit Red Wings are in a weird spot where you think that their rebuild should be over, close to being over, and it isn't in the terms that they're not making the playoffs. So it is a little bit frustrating. I think the biggest problem for Detroit was they had a little bit of a surge there where suddenly out of nowhere you're thinking, oh my gosh, we're talking about playoffs. And then they lost two huge games to the Ottawa Senators back-to-back, and in their past 15 games, 3-11-1. That is exactly what you don't want to see at the time of recording this video. If you're a Detroit fan, this is a club that has a lot of pride, a lot of history, and it looked like maybe, just maybe, they were going to get some magic going and have a first playoff appearance in multiple years. Instead, they've really just hit a slump, and that's frustrating. However, there is plenty to be excited about for this club. I'm going to say it's not all doom and gloom here, as they have young guys like Lucas Raymond, Moritz Seider, and other young prospects to be hopeful about. So for Detroit, I'm going to say they are in a good spot. You have Steve Yzerman, a guy that has been a rock for the Detroit Red Wings when he was a player and was a guy that was big part of what Tampa Bay has built over the years. Of course, they weren't able to win the Cup when he was a GM there, but a lot of those faces that you see now that have hoisted 2 Stanley Cups with the Lightning were part of Yzerman's brickwork building, I guess you could say. So if Steve's able to get the young Red Wings on that same kind of trajectory, or at least that same kind of path, then you do feel good about what they have to offer. A prospect pool that is really enticing. I'm going to say it is not the end of the world for Detroit. Next year, though, the expectations are probably going to start to kick in. On to Buffalo. The Sabres by far exceeded my expectations for them and are set to have their best season since the 2011-12 campaign. Personally, I had them finishing 7th in the division. Probably looks like they'll finish 5th. Great year for them. Really a good year. I was kind of concerned about whether or not a guy like Tage Thompson would be able to replicate what he was able to do. Buffalo gets him on that extension, and things are looking rosy for them. This is why, for the Sabres, I really do feel excited about their future. You have Rasmus Dahlin, Tage Thompson, guys that have been able to take steps, but also replicate that success. Dahlin's been a guy we've wondered for years, could he be a top defenseman for Buffalo, and had some shaky years with some shaky coaching. But yeah, I do feel like Dahlin could be that number 1 defenseman for them going forward, and could very well be a guy that you wonder, is he going to be in the Norris talks for the future? Thompson, of course, replicating a crazy year from last year. he is going to be the face of the franchise if he keeps it up for the upcoming years. And I think a good thing for, the Sabres, they have guys that are already ready to fill in and be good for them. Guys like Dylan Cousins, that's great. And they have other prospects that are coming up that could be very exciting for them. And as long as they fix some of these defensive issues, being one of the better offensive teams in the league, they're going to be fine. Biggest thing is they have to fix a lot of the defensive aspects of their game, or just allowing a lot of crazy chances, a lot of shots against. They're a fun team to watch. Problem is, are they going to let in 10 goals, or are they going to score 10 goals? That's what you kind of have to wonder there for them. But the future is bright in Buffalo, something that I really feel happy to say as a fan of the league and a fan just of teams that really are on the down and out. I would say for Sabres fans, get excited for next year. Are they going to make the playoffs? Can't tell you that, but I do know that if they're as fun as they were this year and they're better next year, this is going to be a great team to watch. So finally, on to the Senators. Or are they looking gloomy into this offseason? That is worthy of talking about. Ottawa is on track to have their best year since the 2016-17 season. But people are still mad. And I think that's because they're in a Canadian fan base or Canadian market and had a stretch there where they're able to go on a run to the Eastern Conference Final. And they haven't really done a whole lot since then. Basically nothing. They haven't made any playoff appearances. But GM Pierre Dorian decided to get aggressive, to go out and get Droog, to go out and get DeBrincat in moves that help the team now. And this is unfortunately kind of bad for him because they'll probably still miss the playoffs this year. So, more gloom for the Senators? Yes and no, and I'll explain why. Yes, in the sense of they really have called up a lot of prospects that, at this point their prospect pool isn't the one where you're saying, oh my gosh, I'm so excited about it. So they have that aspect where there's not a whole lot of those big names that you're excited about. They've still got plenty to be looking forward to. And I think that the biggest problem is right now, you're looking at guys like Jake Sanderson and Shane Pinto. These are guys that are getting really big taste or consistent experience in the NHL. And right away, Ottawa is not feeling that surge where they're in a playoff spot. Now, on the flip side, I do think there's plenty to be excited about here for the Senators. The biggest things being guys like them, they're going to be able to get more experience. And if they live up to the hype that a lot of these people have built up for them in year two, well, I should say for Sanderson in year two, could be big, as they could be part of a supporting cast that comes on in and helps the Sens make it. On top of that, I think a big thing for the Senators is a guy like Tim Stützle is a player who missed some time with some injuries this year and still is having an incredible year. At the time recording this, he has 35 goals, so that's good for them. So you're kind of in a weird spot for the Senators when they've called up a lot of their guys, and you do wonder, can Ottawa be a playoff team going forward? And is the fact that they've called up a lot of these guys concerning? I can't tell you right now exactly. I think the biggest thing for Ottawa is those top guys are going to have to produce, just like every other team. But those guys, those young guys that we're talking about for a while now, that are the exciting guys that you're saying, oh my gosh, if they come in and they succeed, we're going to be good. They have to live up to some of that potential, because if not, Ottawa very well could be in a spot where even if they make the playoffs, they're not a contender to go deep. Right now, out of the three, I would say, well, Ottawa has the highest expectations going forward next year at the moment. I would say that they're the gloomiest that I feel about, but we'll have to see. What are your thoughts on these three teams? Of course, they all did slump towards the back end of this season. Do you feel like they're going to be playoff teams next year? If so, who? And who do you feel like has the best future for the group, and who has the worst future? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below about these three Atlantic clubs. Now, also, please make sure to subscribe if you're new. Hit the subscribe button for me if you'd like. Also, please make sure to stay safe, have a great night, and you go hockey all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.